intro. Broncos country, what's going on? Hope you guys are having an absolutely wonderful day whenever you're seeing this. I'm joined by my good friends again. We have Jeremy and Marc of Marquee Sports. Thank you guys so much for joining. We're going to split this up into two halves. So if you want to catch the second half of this conversation, follow Marquee Sports. You'll catch it over there. What are you doing? Are you even a Colorado sports fan if you're not following Marquee Sports? But before we get started, really quick, for those who haven't seen your faces before, we'll open up really quick. Jeremy, tell us a little bit about yourself and how long you've been a Broncos fan.
Oh man, I was born into it in the early '80s, so yeah, I've been a Broncos fan forever. I was born in Greeley. I lived in Colorado my whole life, native. Feel like I'm the last one left, and and dude, off topic, yeah, seeing all these this is the time of year when you're driving around town and it's all Texas license plates and Florida, and you're just like, get out of here. Besides the point. So yeah, no, I've been a Colorado sports fan forever, and big Broncos fan, and yeah, I love talking Broncos with you guys and talking on X and all over the place.
Most definitely, man. It's great having you here again. And then Marc, give us a little background on you. What got your channel started? What you cover over there?
Yeah, no, appreciate it, man. My channel, man, what got the channel started for me. I think Jeremy actually talked about it once. That was perfect. Or maybe it was you, David. It was one of you guys. I was like, that's the perfect way to put it. Is I was sick of annoying my wife, and basically just complaining to her the whole time. So I was like, I got to find an outlet. I got to get a way to, find a way to be able to put my opinions out there, but also it's almost like a therapy session, uh, in a way too. So that's really why I started it. But obviously, just my passion for sports. I focus mainly my channel on the Denver sports teams, on first and foremost the Broncos. I'll do some Nuggets and some Avalanche news as well, and I'm really looking forward to some fantasy football content. So if you're into that, I'll definitely have a lot of unique and awesome content revolved around that. But yeah, just a Denver native myself, man. Been here my whole life, and it's basically all I, aside from my family, it's all I really care about. So it's just what I do, man.
Well, I absolutely love it. You guys have been some of the best parts of starting this YouTube channel, getting to know the greater Bronco country community. And let's go ahead and kick it off. Like, I'm gonna leave this question a little open ended, but maybe we can all start with kind of one particular takeaway that we've had from mandatory minicamp. I'll put Jeremy on the spot to start with. What's your one takeaway that comes to mind with the news this week?
I would say the biggest thing, and it's a pleasant surprise. It wasn't really a surprise, I wouldn't say, but it was that Bo Nix has passed all the tests so far, and it's just so refreshing to not hear, he's got, he's a rookie and it's a long way to go, and I don't, there's going to be lots of ups and downs. It's just like, no, he looks good. He looks mature. It's everything we thought we were going to get when we drafted him. And now that we have more and more data in-house, it's just the same exact thing that we were hoping for. So I mean, this whole season to me is getting, it's eating cap and getting Bo Nix ready. So, I know there's a competition, but the fact that, everyone is like, oh, he's the same age as Zach Wilson, and Zach Wilson has 30 some starts, and they're this, all that stuff. Well, it's pretty impressive to come into your first camp competing somebody who's been in the building for over a year, has had all the opportunities to learn for the last year, and also you're competing against a guy who has 30 starts, and you're outperforming one, and you're right there with the other. So I think that's got to be the number one storyline so far.
I think so too. It is quite encouraging to hear those pieces of news. Nothing like Paxton Lynch, man. Nothing
Oh
like
God.
Paxton. But what about you, Marc? Like, is there anything else that you would take as one of the big takeaways from this week?
Yeah, for me, and I talked about it a little bit on some previous videos, the biggest thing for me, man, is the change in Sean Payton. I thought I've kind of noticed it. Like when the first presser happened, when way before mandatory minicamp, just in the initial rookie mini camps. But the guy seems like he's just on cloud nine.
Yeah.
He's a different person in the media. He's happy. He's thoughtful. His pressers are going 30 minutes. He's making jokes. And I just feel like he's finally able to come into the season, not just because he's got his quarterback, but I really believe he's finally building this team and his vision. I think he loves the youth on the team. I think he really likes the direction that the team is heading, even though the national media might not think that or agree with it. I just feel like there's a big change in him, and maybe he's realized. He said something in yesterday's conference. He said, because they asked him about it, that you seem rejuvenated, and he said, I think the first year in a new place, you get here and you're kind of. The quote was, you're pissing on all the trees, right? Which made me laugh. I thought it was funny, but it's kind of like. It's kind of like, there's a lot of there was a lot of reports last year that people were walking on eggshells and he was
Yeah.
kind of intimidating. But I think that really goes to show how messed up the culture really was. You're coming from Nathaniel Hackett to Sean Payton. It's that you talk about, that's literally like going from Paxton Lynch to, I wouldn't even say Bo Nix, somebody that's like even more proven. Like from Paxton Lynch to maybe even like Peyton Manning level, like in terms of that kind of level of expectations. And so I think
Yep.
it's really that was really eye opening to me, because I feel like that's going to be something that's contagious throughout the entire locker room. So I'm just really happy to see, and it was consistent. Every single presser was the same kind of thing, and so I'm interested to see how it goes into training camp. But that was a big takeaway for me was just the change in Sean Payton for the better, for sure.
Yeah, it almost reminds me a little bit of, if you remember when Hackett was fired and what was his name? Jerry Rosberg. I don't know if you
Mm-hmm.
caught any of his press conferences
Oh
when
yeah.
he was.
Oh, classics.
Yeah, man, they were like sermons. They would go for a real long time. You go for like 30 minutes and just talk about this, that, and the other. And yeah, like a lot of people were frustrated by him, but I kind of liked it because you don't get to hear that quite often from NFL head coaches going that long. But now, and Sean Payton seems to just be enjoying being here. I know there's been some talk of like, was he actually going to play out this contract if the team sucks and all that? And I feel like he knew that there was this first year that he was going to have to get over, but kind of after that, it was more so a blank slate for him to build the team in his image, and maybe a little bit different than what he had in New Orleans at some different points. But I want to ask you guys, feel free to jump in on this. Has your opinion of the Courtland Sutton situation changed at all right now?
Not for me. Not for me. A lot of people say I'm a Courtland Sutton hater, and that's the furthest thing from the truth. I don't have anything against Courtland Sutton. I always wish him the best, but I've always felt like it was in the best interest of the team and him to part ways. I'm not really surprised. Listen, I'm all about, if players want to get their money and players want to get paid, I'm all about it, man. You do that, and I hope he gets that money. I just hope that it's not here. And like I've said, it has nothing to do against him. I just feel like if you're going to embrace this rebuild, and you're going to you really want to develop these young players. You really want to see what you have in these young receivers, especially after we took Troy Franklin also this year. It's just too many bodies in the room, and so, but it hasn't really changed. I've kind of consistently felt like that really since last year, of moving on from both Judy and him. So,
Do you
but
think, Mark, that
I'd be fine with it either way.
do you think it was interesting watching his press conference the other day? Because of course he talks about how much he wants to be a Bronco, but at the end of the day, like, there's a price to everything. Like
Yeah.
if I'm getting all the money I want, of course I want to stick around and retire here and whatnot. Like, I feel like most fans should be able to read between the lines, like, on those things. But
Mm-hmm.
if it's not really a big deal, I feel like, showing up for what turned out to be two mini camp days where he's mainly just conditioning, like all that, not a huge deal with him being out here. He already had that fundraiser. Do you guys like foresee a potential holdout like actually happening in training camp? And yeah, I guess I'll just leave that there.
Go ahead, Jimmy, if you want to knock this one out.
I think it's possible. I wouldn't have said that. I think we were in the chat room on the DNVR podcast.
Yeah.
He was basically having that interview, and I, to quote the Eminem song, "Will the real Courtland Sutton please stand up?" Because to me, it was like DNVR Courtland Sutton, and then post minicamp practice Courtland Sutton were two different people.
Yeah.
And it's like maybe he's just trying to like, now that I'm in front of everybody, of the media, and in the Denver Broncos facility, maybe I need to be the guy who I'm serious about wanting to get the money and all that kind of stuff or whatever. But when we were watching the DNVR interview, I was like, oh yeah, this is who I've always seen for years. This guy's excited to come in. It sounded like he was almost being kept away as opposed to like deciding to be away, rehabbing, and I thought, like, oh, it's all going to handle itself. And then and then the post practice press conference, I was like, he's just like, we'll cross that bridge, and it's almost like he didn't
Yeah.
want to be, and he was being held against his will there, and so I was like, it was very weird. I think it is possible that he does that, but if he's trying to hold out for more money guaranteed, that means he's unsure that he's a lock to make the team, because it's not, unless he's asking for a raise. I'm getting, let's say I'm paid 15 and I want to get paid 18 or whatever. Okay. But if you're like, I'm supposed to get paid 15, but I won't know until I get that 15 until I'm like through the season or start of the season or whatever. And I want to make sure I get that 15, then that seems like you're worried that, like what Marc was saying, the room's crowded and I could be a late like camp cut or something or trade. So, I could see it happening. I wouldn't have said that a week ago. I didn't think, but
Right.
yeah, I do. I could see that happening.
My biggest thing, and I feel like I've kind of changed my opinion a little bit over the same week as well, Jeremy, where my biggest thing is I just don't want any distractions with this team come training camp. Like I don't want anything. I am so glad that Hard Knocks chose the Bears, because we were one of like 5 or so eligible teams for Hard Knocks, and I just wanted no distractions this year. We've had so many the past couple years, and you factor in the ownership transition and all of that. And I just want this team to just all be about business. And you had Randy Gregory and Frank Clark like being cut after week 2 last year. You had this divide in the locker room. I just want everybody to be on the same page as much as you can with a 53-man roster. I think this is where my opinions changed a little bit. I think if he's still wanting, whether he is going to hold out or not, if he's still being vocal to the organization about wanting more guaranteed money or whatever, regardless if it's a holdout, I say screw it, man. Might as well just trade him for a 6th-round pick, I guess. And that's what I would think would be the value that you would probably get. Do you guys think we could get more? What do you guys think about that?
I think it's about right. I'm kind of on the up. I'm willing to say I almost guarantee that he will hold out. I think I'm at that point. Just reading to the tea leaves back after the season started. I mean, okay, him and Russell Wilson were close. That's kind of one other thing, but there was a lot of diva behavior that you saw from him. Which, like I said, I'm all about people getting their money, but it's like, just come out and say it, And I don't really know how much he wants to be here. I feel like I've kind of felt that from a while, and I don't blame him, because we've been really bad for several years, man. And this is somebody that's never played in the playoffs. So, and I get it. And he's also had to deal with the rumors of constantly being on the trade block. And I know he's trying to play Mr. Nice Guy, and Sean Payton was saying a lot of really great things about it. But I think if it's going to come down to a holdout, which I think it will, if he wants to get more money, I don't think the Broncos will budge. I don't think that they should, and I think ultimately he'll get traded. I think a 6th-round pick is probably accurate for sure, especially if the new team is going to trade for him with the understanding that he's going to get a new contract. Sixth round pick is probably, or maybe like 2/6 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
6 and a 7th.
Yeah, it's hard for me to see any like big time return, like a third round pick coming from him. Probably, I don't even know if he was ever going to return that, but in the past. But I think that ship has probably sailed. This has been interesting with looking into Marcus Colston, how him coming in. I forget if he was undrafted or a 7th round pick offhand, but him coming in gave Sean Payton immediately that confidence to just go out and get rid of Dante Stallworth, which I thought was interesting. And maybe that's the case with kind of what I think is a very talented or high potential group. Some of these guys, but rather unproven. Sean Payton see enough in minicamp to just shut things down day 3 and say we're just going to go ahead and look for suitors for Courtland Sutton.
Yeah, I mean maybe, and I think I think the Tim Patrick news. I mean, there's a lot of positives about him looking really good. Obviously, it's still super early, but I mean, if you think about a room, and I'll push this back to like if you think about a room like, let's assume Courtland Sutton, let's just assume that it's not a financial thing. They're good. He wants to be here. You got to assume that Courtland and Josh Reynolds and Tim Patrick are going to make the team. Health permitted.
Mm-hmm.
So if those 3 guys make the team, what do you think the wide receiver looks like? Where do young guys like Marvin Mims and Troy Franklin and frankly Brandon Johnson, where do they fit into that role?
And Vele and Virgil and there's a lot of people.
Yeah, and so my thing is like, what it's gonna hamper their development. Are you better? Are you a better wide receiver room with those 3 guys as your main 3, or are you a better wide receiver room, with Marvin Mims and Troy Franklin being more involved in the offense? You can't say right now that you're better, but you're certainly more intriguing and you certainly have a higher upside.
Could be more fun.
So I think it's gonna be a lot more fun. So I think that's kind of what you have to weigh as well. I think that a lot of those factors will play into it also.
Marc, I'll ask you about this too, and then we can transition. But have you thought about any teams, like maybe outside the Pittsburgh Steelers, that might have interest in a Courtland Sutton? I really haven't thought too deeply about it, of potential teams that might be interested to give up a late round pick for him. Anybody on your mind?
Yeah, the Bills. I mentioned it in a video a couple of days ago too. Buffalo Bills, I think, makes a lot of sense. We'll see with the cap situation. I mean, he's not. Courtland's cap for this year is not much, and if they end up extending him, it'll be basically nothing. So they could certainly afford him. I think Keon Coleman is an absolute stud. I think he's going to be really, really good in Buffalo. But I think that Courtland Sutton fits really well in that offense because he can be a true wide receiver too, a really, really good secondary option for them. So I think the first team that came to mind was the Bills. And then, teams outside of that, I mean, shoot, he could make sense with the Detroit Lions in a way. He can make sense, but I guess now with them paying St. Brown, maybe not because you're allocating a lot of money to the room. But any teams that have young, really really good receivers that aren't taking too much money, because I think teams always look at how they're allocating their salary cap based off of positional groups. So that's why I think originally the Bills, but I feel like that there's several others. I mean, maybe the Bengals if they end up trading, T. Higgins away to be able to get a vet guy, but a lot cheaper than what T's ultimately going to want. Those are the kind of the 2 that come to mind. What do you guys think now that you've maybe given it a little bit more thought?
To me, it's usually one of those teams that has one of those injuries that they don't see coming, and then they're in panic mode. Yep. So that's usually when these type of trades happen, because the ones where you're like, we got to get rid of him because we don't see him in our plans this year usually happen before the draft. So I thought after we kind of got past the draft, he was pretty safe. And I mean, I still see a world. It's been, this is his first week in town. And I think, we'll know really quick where we're headed when things resume. But yeah, it's probably, if you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck when you're trading somebody, it's probably going to be someone who really feels like they are desperate, and if that's probably an injury coming. So
yeah, that's a good point. You make a good point. That's why I think it might really get taken through training camp, because you're thinking to yourself, well, all right, we're going to trade him or get rid of him either way, right? But maybe if somebody gets hurt or if a team gets desperate, you can get more. So that's a good point. What do you think, David?
Oh man, I've tried to more so look at it. I don't know if Courtland would be thrilled about this, but it might just be the way that it plays out to where he really truly goes somewhere as kind of a 1-year rental
Mm-hmm.
and maybe on a competing team to see what they can do. Like you said, like Buffalo is one of the teams that I've thought of. Um, an interesting one if things continue on. I know they've drafted some wide receivers, brought in some guys like Mike Williams, but New York Jets just seem to have such an issue with keeping guys healthy that I do wonder if there were to be something that happens there, if he has a chance. And then the other one, again, I don't know if this team would look to extend him, but you would like to have another weapon for Kyler Murray opposite of Marvin Harrison Jr. in the wide receiver core. Of course, they have, man, why am I blanking on his name at tight end from CSU?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
I've
why am
been
I
messing
blanking?
up with names too, man. He's a beast.
Yeah, he's a tight end that's on the rise, but yeah, like, do you really want Michael Wilson? I guess is that number 2 wide receiver. We'll just have to see. And very
Trey McBride.
rarely do you see an interdivisional uh, trade, but outside of like Lad McConkey, I think the Chargers wide receiver core has a lot of um, talent to be desired there. But I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's hard for me to see the Broncos just trading him. I mean, I guess we saw it with the Vikings and the Lions with Hawkinson.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's kind of weird because I feel like it worked out for both teams. Because I think, if I remember correctly, um, it was that second round pick that they were able to take Laporta with the Detroit Lions.
Yeah,
So
that was one of those weird trades where you're like, oh man, that worked out great for both teams. Yeah.
yeah. So I don't know, but Justin Herbert needs some more guys to target, I think, and I wonder if he might fit a little bit better in that Jim Harbaugh type of offense where you're not really throwing the ball a ton, and he'd be a nice red zone target for Justin Herbert. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. Any last thoughts on this, guys?
I hope he
No.
doesn't go to the AFC West. That would be a bummer. That would be tough. That'd be tough to watch. Him
It's like
having
Yeah.
Eddie
big
Royal.
catch. Oh man, that would be.
I mean,
tough.
unless he saw, like, all right, it's one of those things where if we don't feel like he's that good, take him.
Yeah,
But I
that's
think in
an
this case, yeah, I would want to see Court in the AFC West for sure.
that would be a dangerous game. I mean, it's one thing to like break up with a guy just because you're like, you feel like that guy just wants to go somewhere else and you want to do right by him, and then it's another thing to just be like, hey, do you want to come beat us? Like, if he feels, I mean, last season still off of his injury, like those 50-50 balls with Russ, I mean, he saved our bacon so much last season. Like everybody who's gonna look towards whatever Bo Nix does or whatever is gonna compare him to the Russ stats of last year, not the actual Russ play of last year. And Russ can thank Courtland Sutton for those stats because I mean there were so many where he just got bailed out.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just like, I'm gonna scramble around and then just throw up, remember that game when you're a kid, 500? I mean, it was like Courtland Sutton just catching 500 balls. That was it. Just in a crowd and like on his hip, like a guy's on his hip. He's catching one-handed stuff. That one play, I still like one of the most incredible plays where he scrambled around, kind of blindly threw to the corner, and Sutton dragged that foot. I mean, that was an insane.
It's like
Buffalo
the
game,
catch of
yeah,
the
that was
year.
wild.
Yeah, it was like
Yeah.
the catch of the year, and it was like, oh, and there's no way anybody could be like, oh, there's Russ, prime Russ right there. I was like, no, that was like from heaven. Like there was so much going on in that play that had to be absolutely exactly perfect for that to work. And one of them was Courtland Sutton just keeping those feet and making that catch.
All right, I got another question regarding this. Then we'll wrap up part 1. We'll transition over Catch the second part at Marc's channel, y'all. But if you can't get anything for him and he's holding out, do you just cut him?
Yeah, absolutely.
I would say no, because there's going to be a time this year in the season that the veteran leadership and the Troy Franklins and the Veles and the Virgils and those kind of guys that we like that are still coming don't have. And for a young, if the goal is this season to get Bo Nix to, you know, ready for his future, I think you really want a guy dependable. And this is what we were thinking like months ago before all this kind of stuff went. But he's just so valuable to have at least one guy that you're just like, I know where that guy is a professional. He does everything. He comes in and does things the right way with the right attitude. So I want the Troy Franklins and the Veles to look at a guy like Sutton because, you know, as much as he's unhappy, he doesn't seem like petulant about things. He's never seemed like a type of guy where you're like, oh, if he's not going to be happy, then he's going to be a cancer. I think he can be a positive and still not have everything. He can, you know, even if he's not here for the long haul, he won't be like disgruntled as far as being a bad example of a player for the young guys.
Yeah, I really feel like I'm on the fence a little bit now where I'm still with you, Jeremy. I think we're a better team with him. I think he would serve Bo Nix better. But my one condition, no distractions, no thinking about anything else other than the team. And that's where maybe I find myself a little bit in the gray in the next month, seeing how things turn out. But guys, we'll go ahead and transition second part over to Marc's channel. So if you're catching it now, be sure to smash that like and subscribe on Marquee Sports. What are you doing if you're not watching Marquee Sports? But let's move on from Courtland Sutton a little bit. And I want to talk, you know, we talked so often on our last show. It became the whole Bo Nix episode, which was great. We're all rooting for Bo Nix. But let's talk about some other players that we're excited about this year and have some conversations about them. I'll pick on you first, Marc. You know, who's maybe a guy that the national media might be sleeping on, a guy or two, but throughout what you've heard through OTAs and minicamp, you're getting pretty excited to see on the field this year.
Yeah. Well, you know what? You know what, David? I felt like we haven't involved you enough yet to this point. So I'm going to flip it back to you, and I'm going to have you answer that question. Now you're the guest, and then I will. I'll give my thoughts at the end. But what do you think,
right.
man? I mean, yeah,
I love
let's
it.
hear more. Let's hear more, David.
All right. Well, where should I start? On the defensive line, or I'll say this: I'm excited to hear the news about Riley Moss. Like, it hasn't been earth-shattering or anything like that, but we've heard some good plays, or about some good plays about him having some impressive pass breakups that he's like looking competent. And I think like that was kind of a concern for me, like going